I take the data and I kind of marry it up with all our other digital metrics. So it's very difficult for us as social...
data directly from social platforms,
Yeah.
I'm guessing, yes.
Exactly. So take the data directly from the social platform, but it's very easy for us to get siloed and think everything's very social. Like, oh, here's the impressions, here's the reach. Okay, that's great, but what are the greater impacts? How does that ladder up to that overarching strategy we talked about? So I like to take those data, the data from social, and marry it up with kind of our website data, our newsletter data, anything that kind of can intersect with social, or that I know social might have an influence on.
That was Alvin, and this is Social 3.0, the podcast dedicated to helping B2Bs drive growth through content and communities. In this episode, we sit down with Alvin, social media lead at the payments provider Thread. Alvin's experience spans multiple years, B2B, B2C, big teams and small teams, so he brings such a wealth of experience to this discussion. And I particularly enjoy the conversation related to what Alvin's done to help prove the revenue impact of social, which I know is something that we all struggle with. I really hope you enjoy this episode. Alvin, thank you so much for taking a bit of time to join me today. Massively appreciate it. So let's start by doing a bit of an intro. Tell us a little bit about your background and who you work for today, and a bit about your role, if that's all right.
Yeah, of course. So I've been doing social media marketing for 12 years, and it started off the back of coming out of university, actually, and finding a role which I was quite fortunate to do back in 2012 when social was still finding its feet.
True.
And very early, actually. I think Twitter had just been maybe launched or thereabouts, 2011, 2012.
Started to get traction significantly.
Essentially.
Yeah.
And I joined a publishing company down in Salisbury. So I live in Poole, so it's not too far for me to travel. And that's where I kind of got on the tools of social and learning it. And it's all very new to businesses, and managed to kind of find my feet, if you like, and my calling card, as I actually think, oh, this is not bad. I do enjoy this. And managed to build up their Twitter presence to actually get to a point where we were actually able to, sell tweets to other kind of brands who wanted to kind of be involved because they saw how well we were doing, which is crazy. Because I was
like, days influencer marketing, basically.
Literally, nobody knew you could do that. And this was in the kind of trade, like plumbing and heating trade. So it's very niche.
Yeah, sure.
So to have brands who would normally buy an advert or an editorial to then say, actually, we've seen what you're doing on social, we'd like to get involved in that, was quite interesting. But then kind of that light bulb went off for me and thought, if I can get people to buy tweets for this company, imagine what I can do for others, essentially. So that took me on a journey of kind of going to bigger and better roles, if you like, in respect. And I worked for companies like Liverpool Victoria, which is, your financial services provider, working with their life insurance side of the business, looking after their social media, then working for P&O Cruises, which is a big travel operator, to then moving to, in between that, working agency side, working self-employed, setting up my own brand, to then finding my feet to where I am today, which is working for Thread, which is a issuer payment processor. So basically we're the technology that sits behind, or used to sit behind, Revolut and Monzo and power that business. So I'm the social media lead there now and overseeing the strategy for them.
Oh, amazing. And what incredibly rich and diverse career across different industry types. So now you're in B2B, obviously, and working in something where, like we were talking off camera a moment ago, where you've got very specific individuals you want to target. And previously, LV, P&O, big consumer brands. So give a bit of a flavour and a little bit of the nuance and differences between leading social and a B2C versus B2B.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I was working for those companies, a few years back, I used to think there were distinct differences, but as I've got older and wiser, lose more hair, I've suddenly realised that actually, and you've probably all heard that B2B to C, and actually it's now being classed as maybe human to human, if you like.
Yeah.
And so what, I've come to terms with that over the years, actually think, well, actually, we're just people who want to be either informed or entertained on social media, as opposed to be sold to all the time. So, back in those days, consumer side, you tried to, as social was then very light-hearted, it was a safe space, you try to lean into that, lean into those cultures to try to be funny and find the connection with the audience in terms of through different content, whether that was through memes or gifts, whatever was new or the flavour of the month. That's what we try to lean into with those brands, especially with P&O when it is very consumer facing. It's about travel. It's a great topic. It's easy to almost talk about it because the options you have, there's just a plethora of different things you can use to connect with your audience. Where kind of come to B2B side, when I started in B2B, people were like, oh, it's almost like grey, if you like, it's corporate, it's all building, it's blue, it's you know what I mean, it's that kind of element. But actually, it doesn't need to be like that, and I've learned that over the years, and I'd like to think other people are starting to kind of get that concept as well, that actually B2B can be fun and informal and a bit like B2C as well.
I love it. So aligned with that, and I think this is one of the main reasons I wanted you on this podcast, because I think you represent such a great depth of experience across these different industries, and debunking some of those myths related to B2B social. So your case is a particularly interesting one, right? Because say you're a payments issuer, provider, I'll pretend to know what that actually means. That sits behind some of the largest consumer fintech brands that you just mentioned.
Right.
How do you go about building a brand for that on social? Yeah, you said P&O travel, great topic, but how do you make fintech exciting and something that can entertain, inspire, educate?
Yeah, I think initially it starts with yourself. It starts with you learning more about the industry, the business. I always like to say to anyone, get to work within different departments if you join a new business. Get to work with developers, work with sales. Spend a day with each of these departments so you can really get the lifeline and the tone of voice of the business, so you can fully immerse yourself in the brand. I think as a marketer and social media lead, that really helps, because at the end of the day, you are that tone of voice. You represent the brand on social, and most often than not, it's the first thing people see. So you need to make sure that that's really fine-tuned into who the brand is, what they represent. So that's kind of a big job for the social media manager, marketing manager, whatever. It is your responsibility to have that really kind of nailed down. So how do you kind of go about building a brand? It's interesting because the industry actually, it's smaller than you think. It's quite a niche industry when you think about financial services, fintech. So it's quite not easy, but if you're able to think a bit more outside of the box, it's easier to stand out. So like I was saying, with B2B, there's this kind of connotation that everything tends to be the same in terms of tone of voice, colours, logos. So we're quite fortunate that we had a rebrand last year, and that rebrand has helped us to step outside of our comfort zone in terms of kind of colours, the name, Thread. We used to be called GPS, Global Processing Services, which is a very kind of corporate name, even if you didn't know what they did. So now we're called Thread, not Threads, just to make sure. Thread, double D, just so there's no confusion. And even that's something different. And the reason why we're called Thread is because if you think of yarn or sewing, we like to think of ourselves as sewing together the payments ecosystem. Because we work behind these brands, we bring it all together, if you like. So that in itself, from a tone of voice perspective, helps us to kind of put that across on social in a much more informal and fun way, if you like. And I know these words sound completely alien to B2B marketers, but it is possible. And I think that's where we kind of flourished, if you like, and where I'm really enjoying the role at the minute, is because we're able to kind of step outside the B2B norms to help build the brand and community.
Got you. So talking about stepping outside the norm, so being social, right? It's typically something that can often challenge B2B businesses, like mindsets and slightly, I'll call it more, I guess, less educated thinking, right? Because a lot of people don't understand the day-to-day of social. And you've had to fight these battles in the past of education, etc., like you were saying before. So give us a sense of how you're pushing social out of the box and how you're kind of bringing the organisation on a journey along with you.
Yeah, so I think we almost have to do the latter before we can do the first part of your question. So we have to bring the C-suite, if you like, the whole business along with us, so they fully understand what we're trying to achieve with not only social, but marketing in general. So making sure that the strategy is nailed down, so everyone is kind of signed up and bought in to the overall marketing strategy, which ties into the company goals, which I think is, a must do. It doesn't make sense if they're completely disconnected. You're just not going to get anywhere. So making sure that's all aligned. So we're all striving towards the same goal and nobody can argue in terms of what we're all trying to do for the business. So bringing them on that journey and then taking them through even the social strategy. I run lunch and learns for the company to help them get a better understanding of what we do on social, what is it even, the basics, because you have to understand not everyone has that kind of entry level knowledge of how you use social as a marketing tool. They know it from a user perspective. So how do I use Instagram and LinkedIn from a user perspective? But from a marketing perspective, it's a completely different lens. So you have to bring them into that journey, whether they like it or not, to help them kind of buy into that. So that, and then once you've got that buy-in and, C-suite are able to understand your rationale behind it, what it's going to provide, you can then say, well, now you know the rationale. Here's the type of tactics and content creation ideas that we're going to use to help achieve that. And the reason why they may be outside of the box is because here's an example of what everyone else is doing in the marketplace now. Here are what our competitors are doing, and it's all very similar. So how do we kind of stand out on a newsfeed, which is obviously very busy, short attention spans, and actually you're not just competing with these competitors, you're competing with people, you're competing with lifestyle brands, you're competing with whoever the user is following or connected with.
Yeah.
So you have to just think outside of that kind of lens that actually these are our main competitors, this is what we would compete with. Actually you're not, you're competing with the whole world.
Yes. It's actually quite similar to a quote I actually heard before. I think it must have come at an event once where someone said, "Oh, your competitors aren't who you think you are. You're competing with cats."
Yeah, literally.
So thinking through that lens makes you realise actually we got to think about this in a slightly different way. So from your leadership perspective, do you feel like you've got the free rein to try and push your content to a point where it does feel like it will stand out in a feed like that?
Yeah, and I think the way I've managed to achieve that is by bringing them on that journey and by showing there's thought and there's data behind everything that we're doing. So we can back up this idea. We can provide the rationale on doing TikTok style videos for LinkedIn, for example. Like everything that we do, there is a process behind it and there's a reason why we're doing it. So that helps to kind of create that really diverse content.
Nice. Are there any examples of the things that you've created that you're like, yeah, that works. This was an idea that we had. We thought that this was going to be good, or push us in a more uncomfortable direction and end up working. Any examples?
So I mean, it's like I kind of said, the TikTok style videos that we are now starting to test on LinkedIn. So we don't have the feature on our company page, but we would do some video with some staff and talk about certain topics with the industry or talk about culture and careers, and we'd edit that into more of a TikTok style with kind of sound effects and GIFs and memes and things like that to help kind of stand out on that news feed. So that's something that we're is very new to the company and we're testing at the moment. It's being received really well because I guess what it stands out to what you currently see on our target market's current newsfeed within LinkedIn, for example.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting hearing you talk about this because then you realise you sometimes going to think about B2B through the lens of it, like you say, grey buildings, boring, stale, etc. Yeah. But actually, we've just got a lower baseline to differentiate.
Yeah.
And standing out just suddenly becomes, provided you've, as you say, brought people along on the journey with you, you've educated the leadership team, you backed it by data, you helped people understand and rationalise some of the things that we know so deeply on social, and you really can start to make a difference, which is great to hear. So let's dig a little bit more into the types of content you create and also your channels. So maybe let's start with channels first. What the primary places that you focus on?
Yeah, so I mean, primary channel at the moment is LinkedIn, and then just behind that we have kind of Instagram, X, if we're calling it that now, and then we just introduced TikTok, which is currently soft launch, and more of a testing bed at the moment. Yeah. So those are kind of our channels, but I'd say LinkedIn at the moment is our kind of primary focus.
Nice. Did it take you a bit of convincing to get TikTok, or?
No. And the reason why I tell you that, and you're probably thinking, it's B2B, it's fintech, surely it would be hard to convince people. But like I said earlier on, by bringing them within the journey, providing that rationale, getting that buy-in, it's actually helped to kind of get those ideas across the line. So when they say, I'm going to start a TikTok channel, normally it's the why. Why do we need to do it? What is the purpose? How are we going to use it? And I've had all of that prepared. I've done the full research as to why we need that channel and answer those questions. So I'm able to present that and say, here are the reasons. And it's almost kind of non-negotiables. You can't really argue with it because I've come up with the whole kind of thought process behind it. So it wasn't too difficult, to be honest.
Nice. And getting this with you, actually, Alvin, like from when you started, we were talking about the broader marketing strategy and how the social filters off of that. How you're bringing people along with the journey. It's very kind of data driven, a lot of your approach in that sense.
Yeah, 100%. I think because data is key. Well, no matter whatever you do, if you don't have the data to back up anything you do, then you have no leg to stand on.
Mm-hmm.
So I recommend that whatever anyone ever presents or has an idea, that there's data, whether it's your own data or external or third party, there is data to represent what you're saying, basically, and back it up.
Nice. And I'm talking about data, actually. I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but I always find this fascinating. We all often talk about data, and we get it. We know we need to look at our data, but obviously the practicalities of day-to-day fighting fires, responding to stuff. We all would love to spend a bit more time on our data to try and analyse the insights. But are there any things that you've done to allow you to, or tools that you've used, any suggestions that's allowed you to utilise data in a most effective way?
So to be honest with you, even though we use social tools at the moment that have all the data and metrics available to us, I actually find the best data I get just from manual interpretation. And that's just taking the data, whether it's maybe, some people might use AI to help kind of interpret that data. I just caveat that there's sometimes maybe a confidentiality risk by inputting sensitive data into ChatGPT, so please be wary on that. Yeah, you don't know where it's going, so just be aware of that. But I find that I take the data and I kind of marry it up with all our other digital metrics. So it's very difficult for us as social.
Data directly from social platforms, I'm guessing, yes.
Exactly. So take the data directly from the social platform, but it's very easy for us to get siloed and think everything's very social. Like, oh, here are the impressions, here's the reach. Okay, that's great, but what are the greater impacts? How does that ladder up to that overarching strategy we talked about? So I like to take those data, the data from social, and marry it up with kind of our website data, our newsletter data, anything that kind of can intersect with social, or that I know social might have an influence on. So being able to delve into website data on a certain page that we promoted, for example, if there's a piece of content that we pushed out on social, how is that traffic kind of transitioned through to the website? When did it come? How long did they last on the website? So I'm then able to paint a better picture of that user who have come from social, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. You're so right in that it's easy to get siloed and look at that stuff and end up talking about metrics that actually are very hard to interpret at business level. We just talk about, we've got this many engagements or this many likes and this many followers. It's great, but let's zoom out a bit. And like we were saying off camera, actually, like one of the biggest challenges in social in particular, and I think this is particularly from B2B, is like the challenge of attribution, right? That how do we truly know it's actually working? We kind of know it, we can feel it, but like, how can you prove it? And I think what I'm hearing you're saying here is you're trying to draw some correlation between it. Whilst it's not, you couldn't necessarily prove out complete like causation, but you can see correlated impacts in your other metrics based on the things that you've done on social.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, one way I would kind of encourage people to look at it is, so what? Keep asking yourself, I've got this many impressions, so what? Oh, so we can get this many gigs, so what? So keep asking the so what, until you drill down, till you almost get to that answer to your question as to, it led to this many website visits. So what? Well, these website visits then filled out contact us form. So what? Then that ended up in the sales team as a sales qualified lead for them to then follow up. That's how you kind of build out that whole kind of attribution journey at a holistic level, if you like. It's not as easy as that, I appreciate. But that is one way of what I currently do in terms of the data. Because I guess you have to think of it, if you were the CMO or you're the CFO or even the CEO and you need those answers, as a social media lead, you're best to become as prepared as possible with everything I've just mentioned. So the more you can answer all those little fine questions, there's nothing for no one else in the C-suite to question you on, provided all the possible outcomes and the reason why you've interpreted the data.
Nice, love it. So are you doing this on like a monthly cadence because quite a bit of work? There's a lot of legwork that goes into that, right? There's a lot of spreadsheet manipulation going on here, but I'm guessing you're probably doing it at a certain frequency.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't know about everyone else, but we tend to have monthly targets in terms of kind of qualified leads, and we also have kind of our quarterly recaps, if you like. So we kind of do a more higher level for monthly, and then a more deeper dive on a quarterly basis, because like you said, just from time perspective and the intensity that it needs to be at, you need to really kind of give it your full attention, if you like.
Yeah, and that makes a ton of sense for like those business indicators and those things that work.
Yeah.
Like, are you using any more kind of micro indicators, as in like just in your social data to inform like next week's social content or anything like that? Or are you typically not analysing at a micro level and just looking at it more holistically?
A bit of both, to be honest with you. And I think not everyone has the budgets for social listening. So, what I try and do is spend times, I use a tool called Feedly.
Okay.
I don't know where it's feed.li.
Yeah.
But it's a good tool that you can put in some industry topics, and it'll just be it's like an RSS feed.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll just bring you breaking news or the latest news within the industry. So that helps me keep my finger on the pulse in terms of what the industry is talking about, what other brands are doing within our ecosystem. So that could help potentially direct our content creation, as well as using the search functions on Twitter, for example, and LinkedIn, putting in the keywords that are relevant. You may have a list or speak to your website team where they have the keywords for SEO, using those to then search those channels and see what content comes up, the latest content that's coming up from those channels, to help us to then kind of make an informed decision of, okay, this is being talked about at the moment, should we lean into it, should we not, what does the future look like potentially on these topics, etc.
And you do that on like a weekly basis, doing that kind of research?
I check Feedly every day.
Yeah.
Feedly's great. Like literally anything that's breaking news or any news item that's published that day, it'll come up, and then you could be like, oh well, Visa and MasterCard are talking about this. Maybe that's something we need to talk about. How quickly can we churn out a video? How quickly can we get our CMO to comment on something, create a blog? And it sets the wheels in motion.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It really like hones in on where you're getting your inspiration from, ideation and that kind of stuff. And it's nice to hear like you looking beyond your data as well, right? Because it's easy just to look at like top performing posts and say, oh, I do more of that.
Yeah.
But making sure you've got your eyes and ears connected to the industry. And I guess, like you said, you don't have a social listening tool, hence.
We do. Yeah.
Interesting.
I was saying that just in case people didn't have a social listening tool.
Okay.
So we also use it for our own brand share of voice.
Nice.
We use it to obviously track keyword mentions, and we have keywords for our own company, like our CEO's name, CMO's name, different names from the company, so we can track that across different articles. So we do have that data. But I come from a background where I didn't have the budget, so I had to think of other ways to kind of do social listening, if you like.
Very cool. So you said one of my trigger words here, which is share of voice.
Oh, I thought it was budget.
Yeah, that too, actually. But like share of voice. I don't know, how do you look at this? Do you pay attention to it? Do you care about the metric?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
I think, again, if I was to put my kind of, even though I've never been a CMO or a CFO, if I was to put that hat on and think, well, what does that mean, share of voice on social? You'd be like, well, it just means, we're being more talked about than other brands, but what can it correlate to, essentially? So if there's a way that can help me paint a bigger picture into how, again, we're laddering up to that strategy or those objectives, then I'll use it and I'll do it. But most often than not, I guess it's a nice to have. It's a nice to have to know that you're being talked about in comparison to your competitors, which also helps, again, if you need a rationale for why you need more budget, for example. Well, actually, we need more budget. We need X to achieve Y because of Z. And the Z is the social listening share of voice. And these guys are catching up. And we need to make sure we're still front of mind. So there's different ways how you can use data for what you need to achieve.
Definitely. And that's why I often talk about share of voice, precisely for that purpose of helping articulate an argument as to the role of social, how we need to spend, and basically some of the marketing fundamentals, which is if your share of voice is bigger than your market share, your brand is going to grow, right? And if you're outpacing your competitors, which have a larger market share, but your share of voice is larger, then over time you're going to erode their market share. And I just find that as a very a simple rule of thumb to go like, marketing isn't rocket science. This is a very simple way of helping cut through all of the complexities of social brand building or whatever. You just go, there's a very simple metric for that, which it's like you say, it's kind of like the story you tell with the numbers that helps get the right result. It sounds like.
Like I said, I guess it's difficult for people who don't have that tool available to them. It's like, well, then how do people who don't have social listening or the tool to share a voice, how could they then do that?
Yeah. And that's definitely something you need a tool for, because that would be far too much Excel, time on Excel. So let's talk a bit more about content. So really interesting about analytics, but let's talk about the types of content you create. You mentioned those kind of TikTok style videos on LinkedIn that you start to experiment with, but what are the core like content pillars you're working with, the types of things that you create?
Yeah, so within the marketing team, we have a team that creates content for the site. And actually, as I touched on earlier, that sometimes is driven by some of the tools that we're using to understand what topics are being talked about. So they'll create the content and then obviously work with me in terms of how we kind of activate that via social. And when I say activate, it's, how we're going to do that. Is it through an infographic? Is it through a still? Is it through an animated graphic or a video? And at the moment, 8 times out of 10, it's going to be a video, because we understand that people are kind of time poor, if you like, and don't have the time to kind of necessarily read a longer posts, depending on what your audience are into and what they like. And we found at the moment that we're having good uptake on our video content at the moment. We're trying to keep it as short as we can in terms of being able to deliver the points across that we need to help drive traffic to the articles. But that's one area that we seeing success in the moment is video content.
Nice. Okay. So when you say like driving traffic back to the articles, I'm guessing like how do you add those links? How do you direct the traffic? And then you do it in the video, which is great.
Yeah.
Where do the links live?
Yeah. So the links live in the post copy.
Okay.
So there'll be a bit post copy above the video at the moment. If we take LinkedIn, for example, and ideally, what you think. I almost like to class them as a trailer. So you're creating like a trailer, if you like, for the article or for a longer length video. So ideally that trailer will help entice people into thinking, actually, I want to learn more about this. Sometimes there won't be a link. Sometimes it'll just be a video providing value and everything that people need to know. Because like I said, people are time poor, and if you can just provide some sort of valuable source of information to somebody's day, then why not? Why have to send them off somewhere else all the time? I'm not saying you shouldn't, but you don't have to do it all the time. By helping us, by doing that content, helps us put our brand front of mind by actually saying, oh, that's an interesting video from Thread. I need to go to the website, but actually I'll be interested to see what they do next time, or whatever. If you give it that full funnel approach, then you can start to picture out where different content can hit different people within that funnel.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that's. Yeah, do you want to expand on that actually and talk about like the different areas of the funnel, for example, how you think about that?
So, a lot of the time people think social is top of the funnel. And when we talk about touch points, first touch attribution, last touch attribution, you could argue that actually social media, if you were to plot out your customer's journey, social media is almost the only constant, if you like, on that customer journey, because you could see an ad on social or Google, and then you go off and do something else, and then you might remember that, or you might go on Instagram and you see a post from us again, for example, and it'd be like, oh, actually, yeah, I remember Thread. Then you might go back to Google to then Google Thread and find out some more information. So I like to think that social media has its own funnel, as opposed to the wider marketing funnel, if you like.
Interesting.
So you almost have to treat, because people are on social at different times of the day, they're using different channels, you have to be prepared for that and not just treat it as kind of a top of the funnel awareness tool. So I think, for me, that's how I look at it anyway. People have their own kind of preferences, but I think that's how you need to map it out.
And I think it's an important thing about this, because there is no right or wrong way of doing it.
Totally.
In social, it's just like, that's why it's so valuable to have you share your experiences, because some people might use it top funnel.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not saying they shouldn't. I just think that it's more than that. I think what I've come to learn over the years about social, it's very specific to your brand, your audience. So, and we said this off camera, one thing I'm not a big fan of is hearing people talk about, the best times to post, or this and that. Well, actually, what's that based on? That's not based on my audience, because what you're telling me doesn't correlate to when my audience are online. So I have to make sure whatever I'm doing is catered specifically to our target personas and their behaviors on social media, sometimes a little bit of psychology as well as to what they like, what they don't like. So, when it comes to that element of things, I think you have to be so specific, laser focused on your audience to then kind of build that out.
Yeah, I love that. So let's go deeper into being laser focused on your audience. So what does that mean for you, and how do you become laser focused? How do you walk a mile in your customer's shoes, etc.?
That's exactly it. It's walking a mile in our customer's shoes. So I said earlier, being able to spend a couple of hours or a day within different teams, that will give you so much insight into your customer. Forget social listening, forget social media usage. What are they looking for? What are their problems? And how are we as a business going to solve them? And how are you going to portray that on social? And it doesn't need to be like, hey, we've got this product. That's our job. It's to think of creative ways of how to provide that solution in a creative way, but almost in a way that they don't even know that we're providing a solution. They're just brought in by what we're saying, our messaging.
Because you truly understand who they are.
Exactly, because you're laser focused. And the way you get laser focused is you go to your account management team, you go to your sales team, you see what are people coming to us with? What are their biggest concerns? What are their questions? What are they struggling with? What didn't they like with their previous provider? All of that, you could argue, is content. So, okay, I've got all these points. I can understand, I can paint a picture on these people now. So I understand exactly what they like, what they don't like, whether it's cost, whether it's, efficiency, whether it's, time. So we can then start creating content around that to help provide value for them.
Love it. Yeah, totally. Going back to the content piece, because we spoke about the videos and you spoke about some of the longer pieces of content, which are obviously built for the purpose of the website, etc. I'm guessing they're kind of like white papered research papers or something like that.
A bit of both.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm curious then about other types of content that you might create, any like webinars or any kind of other long form type of content, or is it mostly stuff from the website? And I guess it's gated on the website too, or
again a bit of both. There'll be some elements which are gated, which we use as part of a kind of a paid campaign, if you like.
Yeah.
And there'll be obviously guides and industry articles which are ungated. We also do webinars, normally with partners. We like to get partners involved so we can help leverage their networks as well. It's a nice, easy way to get exposure for free, if you like.
Yeah.
So, we're a big fan of webinars and, again, leaning into what we do from social to help kind of direct that topic in an ideal way. So we're not too off-piste, if you like, in terms of, well, actually, nobody cares about that topic because it's not on trend or we're not thinking about it. So, again, we need to lean in there to help kind of direct that conversation a little bit.
Nice, yeah. I'm a big fan of those like partnership webinar approaches because, as you say, just immediately opens up a whole brand new feed to you. Yeah. Ultimately, a whole brand new audience that you can just get in front of.
Growth hacking, I like to call it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So that's a regular thing then, isn't it?
It's starting to be more regular. I guess with us, it's always time, isn't it? It's trying to fit these things in. When you're a small team, it's just trying to manage everything, amongst everything else, really.
Because you're pretty much on your own, like you and kind of one other, is it?
Yeah. I mean,
doing social.
Yeah, as it stands, I'm kind of 9 out of 10 things on social I'm currently doing. I have, somebody in the team who helps in terms of kind of that design element, but everything we've been talking about, I do myself, essentially. It's a lot.
It's a lot. And let's talk about some of the areas that you focus on in social. So of course you spoke about the different channels that you focus on.
Yeah.
But what about, and I guess that's all organic content. You touched on paid a second ago. So paid social, talk us through your approach there.
It's a big part of our strategy, if you like, for social, but also as part of that wider marketing strategy in terms of how we can generate new business, demand generation. How can we achieve that on social? And paid media helps us with that. So again, when I talked about those personas, building out the picture of the audience, we're able to then use that to help target appropriately on social through different ads. And mainly at the moment for us, that's LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. So we're doing a lot of LinkedIn advertising, and we do a lot of digital advertising in terms of kind of SEO, PPC, and search and display. So that kind of all marries up and makes sure everything's all connected, so nothing is disjointed. So in terms of messaging, everything is uniform. Mm-hmm. So maybe it might be tweaked to help to fall into the right channel. So you may see a slightly different message on LinkedIn than you might on search, but that's because of the environments. So we take that into consideration as well. But that goes hand in hand with an always-on content strategy. So it's not just one or the other. There's always two working in parallel to help kind of achieve our outcomes.
Nice. Okay, that makes a ton of sense. And for LinkedIn, that's the primary platform you're running ads on, yeah? Okay. Yeah. And have you found that you managed to get the ads working for you? Just my own personal experience, it probably speaks more to my inability than anything else. really struggled to get LinkedIn ads working.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we said at the start, Ken, it's test and learn a bit for us, and a lot of A/B testing to get to a really good spot to where we are now in terms of when we look at kind of click-through rates and cost per click. Some of the results we're getting are above industry averages, which is really good for us to see, because we're really proud of being able to do that. And I think part of that has been down to testing new creatives to achieve that. Like I said, standing out, to what you might normally see in a B2B world has helped us to achieve that.
For the things that I've achieved above the baseline, any sense of what types of things have been working, the types of content and creating?
Yeah, it's interesting because you might think, it might be like a video or something like that. Actually, some of the biggest drivers for results have been kind of still images, which I know it's crazy. It's just been still images with a very clear kind of, not call to action, but a very clear statement with an interesting graphic that you might not associate with us or within the industry.
People in the graphic or?
No, so not people, just so a campaign we run is because we like to think of ourselves as the magician behind the kind of the payments ecosystem. So we lead into that and use kind of like magic cards or like playing cards or pulling a rabbit out of a hat and things like that to kind of help kind of visualize it. So that was a bit outside of the box, if you like.
Okay, I'm with you. It's not, I'm picturing it now. So, no, that's fascinating and counter to what you would think, and also just speaks to the points where you started this conversation out of just not following what the rest of the competitors are doing. That it suddenly becomes distinctive, and it's that moment that snaps people out of the standard feed that they're scrolling through. It's like a wake up call. Like, oh, right, and then you expect to see a rabbit being pulled out of a hat.
Yeah, so, literally. And I think what I find quite funny now is when you start having that kind of flexibility in creativity, what we've seen now is, I won't say who they are, but some competitors mimicking some of the content that we've done. And to me, that's kudos. Yeah. Because I'm like, hey, look at you guys trying to cash in on what we're doing now. So but that just shows there's, like we said, there's no silver bullet, but in this case, I might take it a little bit and enjoy that little kind of bite of the carrot in terms of, hey, we must be doing something right if other people are duplicating.
Too right. So you got organic, you got paid.
Yeah.
Other elements that you're thinking about and involving around social.
Yeah. So I mean, one of the things that I'm looking to test hopefully this year is make more use of the kind of newsletter function within LinkedIn, as well as the live aspect as well. I think as soon as you mention that word live, the kind of C-suite kind of like that. I can't go live. You haven't got a script. But I think that's again taking them on that journey to say, hey, it's okay to go live. Don't worry, we can pre-read it and pre-prepare anything that you need to. But I think going live helps kind of again add another string to your bow. It's a different creative format as well that people aren't expecting that from us. They're not expecting because we've never done it before. So again, that is another kind of new thing I'd like to test. Like I said, we just, not just started, but soft launch kind of TikTok. So just trying to figure that out as well, how we can lean into the subcultures, if you like, TikTok as well, and figure out how that might correlate to what we do in our world.
Like hashtag FinTok.
Exactly that. Yeah. So, financial literacy. So instead of, us talking about ourselves and products, we actually just talk to the next generation in terms of what you need to do in terms of, finances and how does your debit card work? Do you know how your debit card works? How does your phone pay for stuff? Do you know how that works? And because we're involved in that world and that technology, we're able to explain it.
That's cool.
Something different.
So we spoke a bit off camera about you starting to involve some of your employees and team members in social as well. So it's like the next evolution as to where you might be taking your broader social strategy. So talk a bit.
Yeah, so I think everyone's probably heard that, one of the best things in terms of social is personal branding, and people buy from people essentially. So that is something that I'm really kind of trying to push internally at Thread in terms of kind of that, not social selling per se, but everyone being able to build out their own personal profiles to help advocate for the brand, because, they're our strongest advocates, if you like, is the people who work for Thread. And you can only say so much on a company page or from a company brand before people start to think, well, you're just a brand. What are the people within the business talking about? So we're trying to really build out a program that can help achieve that internally.
Nice. Okay, so you're right at the beginning of this journey, I guess. So I think this would be really helpful for others to hear. Where do you start when you're trying to build?
Yeah, I think it's also, as a marketer, know your stuff. So within the business, you need to be seen as the expert of your area. So for me, I need to be seen, and probably am seen now, as the expert in social media. And I've only been able to achieve that by telling everyone, doing these lunch and learns, running workshops, being more proactive internally to help educate everyone in the business so they can say, hey, this guy knows what he's talking about. And, helping, doing things like this with yourself, gives me a bit of gravitas as well, if you like to say, well, actually, we've seen on LinkedIn you're doing these talks and these podcasts, so you must know what you're talking about. So that also helps. So, yeah, it's never easy, I think, but I think you have to have a plan as to how, especially if you don't have a tool. I know there are tools out there like advocacy tools that make it a lot easier, but obviously cost a lot of money, but there are a lot of ways you can do it for free. And that's creating your own program internally, mapping it all out, and also what do you want to achieve? What do you want to achieve from what you're trying to do, and how are you going to get that across in the most simplest way? Because you're not talking to marketers, you're talking to, in my case, potentially developers, account management, sales. You're talking to everyone in the business. So you have to make sure that messaging from yourself is something they can easily digest.
Got you. So, yeah, just to play that back, essentially being the trusted expert in their space, you being like the main person to drive this initiative forward, and know that it's going to take a while to get everyone on this journey. It's a process of education, and of course all these people have got their day-to-day jobs and time.
Exactly
time
that.
is of the essence.
Exactly, and that's why I think something like Lunch and Learns helps, because you can say, hey, I know you've got a spare hour for lunch, bring your lunch along, and we'll talk you through some of the things we're doing on social, or some of the things that you can do for your own LinkedIn profile to help with your own kind of personal brand awareness that will help us to achieve our marketing goals, because if we achieve that and achieve the company goals,
Everyone's winning.
Everyone's winning basically. So yeah, I think there's that. Maybe if you use Slack, setting up our own Slack channel like we have. You have our own Slack channel so people can put their own questions in there about LinkedIn, or setting up drop-ins. So we do a digital drop-in with myself. I set up a time and say, hey, I'm here in this meeting room from this time to this time. Drop in. We'll do some one-to-one on your LinkedIn or any other question on social. I'm here to help. It's providing those outlets for people to say, hey, so there's no questions. There's no pushback to say, hey, you didn't give us this, or we didn't have access to that. Ticking that one off will hopefully help kind of achieve that.
Nice. And have you started to find people like starting to share stuff on social? Are you at that point yet, or?
We're getting there. It's like you probably heard, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
And that is essentially the case, because people are doing something sometimes that is completely alien to them. And the more you can provide, so we go to as far as to provide post copy. Say, hey, look, we've done 10 variations of post copy for this post. Here's the asset. Again, might be all in the Slack channel, might be on SharePoint, whatever you're using. It's all there. So essentially what people need to do is just lift and shift. So I'm trying to make it as easy as possible for somebody, so there's less barriers for them to kind of get involved. But ideally, I would like them to kind of do it themselves, be more proactive. And we're getting there, and we're seeing good success at the moment. It could be better, but like I said, it's a work in progress.
Yeah. I hear similar from other businesses too. We all know there's a lot of power to be unlocked here.
Yeah.
And, it's a journey.
Yeah.
It's a journey.
Exactly, yeah.
So Alvin, you spoke about and mentioned Discord earlier. So curious to know how you're going to be using some of those community-oriented platforms, Discord, Reddit, etc.
Yeah, I mean, Reddit is brilliant because, again, if people don't have the budget for social listening, it's great to lean into real-life, real-time conversations about certain keywords or topics. So we use that to put in keywords or topics that relate to us to see what people are talking about on Reddit. It's a real goldmine, probably one that people forget about as well. Forums are like a forgotten goldmine that can be utilized, and Discord's very similar. And what we find on Discord is we can actually hone in on specific personas. And what I mean by that is actually on Discord, we find developers tend to use that channel more than most. So it's another opportunity for us to talk to that target audience via that channel specifically, or even just listen, just use it for information gathering and find out what are they talking about that can help us to then go back to the drawing board in terms of content creation.
I love it. And I think it's such a great way of thinking about social media from a different perspective, rather than like, hey, it's just a feed and out it goes. We're using channels, or you using channels for different purposes, not just always for distribution, sometimes for consumption and just listening.
Yeah.
And sometimes to target specific people, which I think just speaks a lot of your kind of data-driven approach that you started with. Alvin, this was absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for taking a bit of time to join me today.
No worries. Appreciate it. Thank you, Andy.
Awesome. See you soon. Thank you so much for watching or listening, and we'll be back next time with some more B2B leaders sharing more of their expertise around how they build brands and how they drive growth through content and community. Be sure to click like and subscribe to help this podcast grow, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.